I was born in New York City in Manhattan, and I have two older brothers who are 10 and 14 years older than I am. I was an unexpected child. No, I wasn't the accident. I was a true love child. Let's put it like that. My two brothers, the first one came 10 months after the honeymoon, and the second one came 10 months after my father came out of World War II. I'm the true love child, that one. You can keep that in the thing. But they were just in the state of building a home on Long Island. Daddy worked downtown Manhattan, Rockefeller Center, and he was a tailor. And they were building this house when they discovered I was popping along. And I grew up in a wonderful church on Hempstead, Long Island, in Nassau County. And there was a young couple who had come to my church when I was a child. They were graduates of Westminster Choir College in Princeton. They were indoctrinated in a wonderful way that when you go out to serve, whether in schools, but especially in churches, you want to create singing communities. And literally, John Finley Williamson, who was the founder of Westminster Choir College, had this belief that you create singing from the crib to the grave. And that's literally what Carl and Carol Weber did when they came to my church, Lutheran Church of the Epiphany in Hempstead. And so I was one of the rambunctious 6-year-olds in Sunday school or whatever, and there were a bunch of boys, and Carol had her own sons around the same age, and she just grabbed a bunch of us, and there were more boys in the junior choir than girls, which is, especially even now, that's really kind of unusual, but she knew how to do it. And she gave me my first solo to sing when I was 6 years old. Thou didst leave thy throne and thy kingly crown when thou camest to earth for me. But in Bethlehem's home was there found no room for thy holy nativity. Oh, come to my heart, Lord Jesus, there's room in my heart for thee.
And it sounded just like that.
Yeah, right. 2 octaves higher, about nothing. No, but you plant something in a young person's mind and heart, and it stays there for a lifetime. And she taught us proper singing, but she didn't dumb down to us. And we learned not only to sing well, we learned how to behave without having parents right by us to keep us still in church. So there's a lot of self-discipline that came out of that, but really good singing techniques. When I was about 10, 11 years old, as graduates of Westminster, they would take high school kids from our church down to a summer vocal camp that Westminster Choir College still runs. But at that time in Princeton was an organization that was then known as the Columbus Boy Choir that later became the American Boy Choir. And they said, we should take a bunch of you down to that summer camp. And I first heard the boy choir came to Long Island in 1967. I heard a concert. I went against my will. If my dear mother was on this earth still, she would go, you were the biggest pain in the neck. And my brothers, I think, were going to a Yankees game with my dad. And I said, I'm going here, a bunch of little choir boys. And I pouted the whole way. It was in the North Shore of the island, and I got in and I heard one number, and I said, I want in. At which point she said to me, you're going to be the death of me yet. And I went to camp there for 2 summers. They invited me to come to school, but my parents said, we don't have the money to send him away to school. And, my mother said, I didn't have this child at age 40 for somebody else to raise him. And through a couple of antics of my own, we won't go into that right now, but I eventually did get them to say yes, and school was very generous in scholarship aid, and I sang in the American Boy Choir for 2.5 years. And that was the thing that really kind of lit my fire for choral singing. One of the things, this was in the late 60s, so this was a situation that once you got inside those doors of that school, you were judged on who you were as a person and what your skill level and what your talent was. Not your socioeconomic background, not your race or ethnicity. This is about the time I went to school soon after Dr. King was assassinated. So to live in an environment where somebody does judge you on your head and the content of your heart was a powerful thing. I also, maybe one of the few times I ever encountered, not in the school, but on a tour, segregation. My first tour was down to the Southwest in Tennessee. And I remember getting off the bus. There was another young African-American boy in the choir, and we both had to go to the bathroom. We had been on that bus forever. And we darted towards the front, and the choir mom who was traveling with us said, you need to come. I said, ma'am, I have to go really bad. She said, you need to come with me. And we had to walk about 1.5 blocks. And I saw the sign for coloreds. I still remember that. I still remember that. But what I also remembered is that was never the condition of the boy choir. We were, but that was the thing that really, you lived it 24/7, sang with some of the great orchestras in this country and in Canada. When I was a sophomore in high school, my church assistant pastor had said, I want you to hear this choir that's coming from Minnesota. They're known for their beauty of sound, and after you've sung in a boy choir, you would love them because there's sopranos sing and the women sing with such purity of sound. And I said, well, thanks a lot, but I have tickets to that same night for the Moody Blues at the Garden. Well, he went behind my back to my parents. My father was not going to be the one to make me give up those tickets. My mother said, we went through this with the boy choir thing. Just, the man's going to offer you free tickets, go. I said, but I paid for these tickets myself for the Moody Blues. She said, tough, you're going to go with him. So my buddies and I all went in the same train, Long Island Railroad to Penn Station. They go up to the Garden. I get in a cab with this guy. Lincoln Center, and we got in there just before the choir marched on the stage. And he said, you're going to really love this. They sing so pure, and they never use instruments. So I was pointing on the stage. I said, so what's that? There's a little Porter Teeth organ and a string bass. He said, that's strange. Choir comes out, and then the conductor comes out. He says, well, Dr. Chris Johnson looks like he's dyed his hair and he's gotten shorter. Well, it wasn't Olaf Choir, the second conductor of the choir. It was Kenneth Jennings, who was my mentor later. It was his first tour in his 22-year history as conductor. This is his first tour of the East Coast. I remember years later when somebody asked me, what did you think of the choir? I said, they were okay. They're pretty good. Little did I know, years later I'd be their conductor. I went to St. Olaf College with several different interests. Music won out, and I have a vocal performance degree from St. Olaf, and went on to University of Illinois for a master's degree, and that's where Andre Thomas and I met. He was starting his doctoral program. I was starting my master's. It's been a 40-year-long friendship, he and his wife and I. And I was about to go. I thought, I've had enough of the Midwest. I'm going back to civilization on the East Coast, and I had a teaching job offer for a very kind of prestigious private school up in Massachusetts, the Northfield Mount Herman School, and procrastinated, like I often have done in my life, about things, and didn't sign the contract yet. And then all of a sudden I get a call. Our major professor, Harold Decker, called me in the office. He said, I've had a call about you. Oh, for Northfield Mount Herman? I said, no, Calvin College in Michigan. I said, Calvin College? Where? He said, I didn't play there. He said, well, they know about you and they want to interview for a 1-year sabbatical leave. I remember calling my parents, and my father said, you're going to go someplace for 1 year, you're staying in the Midwest, and you could come back to the East Coast and have a long-time job that's secure at a very prestigious school. I said, but I'm 23 and they're offering me a college job. And when I said I was taken, that's when my dad said, you're your mother's child. You really are your mother's child sometimes. But 1 year I went there for sabbatical leave. After that first year, I applied to 25 jobs and got rejected by all 25 jobs. And thought I was selling shoes or something. I didn't know what I was going to do. Calvin called back in the summer, and they said we can have part-time. Well, they were paying me part-time. I was working full-time plus. But I took over the symphony chorus, children's chorus. At one point, I was directing 7 different choirs, But it was a good life, and I was there for 10 years. And so 1 year turned into 10 years, and I'm in my 29th year now at St. Olaf. The choir is 107 years old, and I'm the 4th conductor in that time. And right now, I've surpassed my immediate predecessor's record. He taught there 37 years, but he had the choir 22 years. His predecessor, the son of the founder, Olaf Choir, had the choir for 27 years. So I'm trying to catch up to the old man. And in 3 years, I'll have matched him, and I'll give him a couple more years, and someone else can take over at that point. So it's been a good run. I think you're always a music educator when you're in this type of work, whether I'm in the private studio, whether I'm in the classroom, whether I'm in the rehearsal setting. And you're constantly being an advocate. I'm not a composer. You would not want to hear my compositions, but I do edit 2 choral series that have done very well. I'm co-editor with my retired colleague, John Ferguson, of a St. Olaf choral series with Augsburg Fortress Publishers. And then now for over 25, almost going on 26 years, I've edited a series for Earth Songs. I think I was one of the first series that when Ron Jeffers started the company, he reached out to me. He knew of my interest in doing especially multicultural choral music, and he believed in me, and he was an incredible man. And he was also meticulous in the types of music he put out. And so even to this day, while we have independent publishing and self-publishing, Earth Songs has been, I think, I've been proud to be associated with them because they turn out a product, the highest quality, We lost Ron a few years ago, but the people who have maintained the company have understood his philosophy and his standards of excellence. So I think you're an advocate. You're trying to share. And for me, though, I would say I shepherd a tradition in St. Olaf that was known especially for its vocal sound, its choral sound. But my predecessor, I think, evolved that tradition in such a way to look at how you do proper historical performance practice of older music. I've opened the door to looking at global music, that you bring the art music and the folk music of people, and you do your studies, same that you would do on a Bach motet, I do for an African American spiritual, or I do it for a Latin American folk song. You must do the same. You must have respect for whatever tradition. That type of advocacy has been important to me. But I've learned more and more in the years that I've taught. Music is but a vehicle to reach human beings. And if you don't transform the hearts and minds of the people who perform the music, and then in turn the people who hear the music, it becomes really quite vain idolatry. Very narcissistic, And the art has so much more meaning when it can transfer. When I teach as a teacher of singing, some people say, well, you're teaching this sort of Western European concept of singing. Yes, but I'm trying to teach a style of singing that will allow them to sing literally from the crib to the grave. I don't want them to be singing a style of music that will just use one aspect of the voice and that will shortchange their ability to make music.